9:48, time to bring you up to date with today's front pages of the newspapers. This is how they're shaping up.
Here's the Telegraph first of all, and like most newspapers, it leads with the Metropolitan Police Commissioner's apology to victims after a serving officer was revealed to be a serial rapist. Going to be talking about that next.
The Guardian also featuring PC David Carrick and his brutal campaign of rape and terror.
A lot of newspapers asking how he got away with it, how the police missed the serial rapist throughout 20 years. 20 years. The Times, it focuses on the mass walkout by teachers, which will hit millions of schools, not millions of schools, millions of pupils in lots of schools.
And finally, the Mirror paying tribute to the late actress Gina Lollobrigida after she died.
No, what are you
You read it.
Gina Lollobrigida.
Sorry.
What? Don't
She
tell
died
me you don't
yesterday,
know who
aged
she
95.
was.
I recognise her, okay, but you know, 95 is pretty old.
Gina. Norman Baker will have had an eye on Gina Lollobrigida.
Well, she was 95.
I mean, exactly.
No, but when in her heyday in the 50s and
Oh, I wasn't around then, Eamonn.
Exactly. If Norman thinks
you're
he's
not
too
aware of
old.
Gina Lollobrigida? Seriously?
Young.
I'm too young to know about all
So
that.
she's in the Sophia Loren.
Yes, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, there we go. You have seen she wore a yellow ribbon, have you?
No.
I'll save you the rendition of it again. I'll save you all of that. Johnny Norman, former Conservative advisor Claire Purcell here as well. Very nice to see you, Claire. So let's begin, guys. Claire, from a woman's perspective, first of all, I think on this one, blind eye turned to Met rapist, says the Mirror, and that's just what everybody's asking. How on earth did this man get away with this for so long?
And that is a question that really needs to be answered, and very, very quickly. 49 offences he has admitted. 24 rape claims. I mean, this is not somebody with a small amount of bad behaviour. This is an inherently bad individual. The Met Police haven't dealt with, and they had many, many opportunities to deal with him at the time. Even as late on as 2021, when rape was reported, he was put on restricted duties, but wasn't re-vetted, and then was just allowed to continue after that. And you've got to wonder what the Met Police's vetting structure is, because obviously it isn't good enough. This is not the first officer, and the majority of papers are now saying how many more are out there, calling them monsters. And I think that we have the right to be extremely concerned that the Met Police don't take these things seriously. They don't re-vet their officers, and they don't pay attention to women, which I find the most concerning factor. And the victim blaming that goes on as to why women aren't coming forward and reporting this really has to stop. That narrative
come
is
forward sooner is the line that we're hearing.
But guys, legitimately it will be a question. I totally agree. I'm not disagreeing with you, but people will be asking the question, why didn't someone come forward? And I think the obvious thing is that this man was in a position of power, and if a woman goes to the police, we're thinking he's going to hear about this as well. But how some men get away with this coercive control. I mean, he was living in his life a dreamland where he was being basically fed victims and allowed to get away. It just beggars belief.
Misusing his warrant card so people would trust him, so women would think they were safe, and then actually telling women, if you try and complain about it, no one's going to believe you.
Well, I want to bring in Norman Baker, because obviously you spent time in the Home Office. Well,
Yes.
the government yesterday saying that this was a sobering moment for the Met Police. But should the government still have confidence in the Metropolitan Police? Should they still have confidence in their new commissioner?
Well, I mean, Mark Rowley says, I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. I mean, we've been here before, haven't we? And what we have to do is try to make sure it doesn't happen again, rather than just apologising each time someone comes out of the woodwork who's of this nature. It's interesting you mentioned Sir Braverman, because what we have is also yesterday was the police being given more powers over individuals in terms of identifying those who might break the law, and the police ability to stop them before they break the law. This is in terms of environmental protesters and so on. The police have got tremendous power over individuals. They've got the power of arrest. They've got a status in society. And the idea that they haven't been vetted properly is just unbelievable. There are guidelines from the College of Policing on vetting, but police police force is not obliged to follow them. This is absolutely extraordinary. We're talking in this guy about 9 times he was reported for crimes. We're talking about 80 sex offences, 48 rapes over decades. How can this man not have been picked up? You know, there's a really systemic, serious issues, not just for the Met, but for the police force as a whole. And you know, in order for society to work properly, the public have to have confidence in the police. We cannot have a totalitarian regime where the police kind of bang people over the head. We have to have policing by consensus. And we're not going to have that if people don't have confidence that the police officers are honest and straight.
Absolutely. And we know that there's 1,000 horrible cases being reviewed by police officers, and Mark Rowley actually saying there will be more horrible instances of officers coming forward as a result of those.
There will be. And there's one other issue, actually, which is that people, women who report rapes, the chances of those rapes ending up with convictions is tiny. It's really remarkably small. I tried to address this in the Home Office when I was there. You know, you're down now to about 3 or 4%. It's absolutely shocking.
There was a case I was going to refer to, but I won't because it's still ongoing. The Foreign Secretary's in Washington. What's he there for? What's he looking to do?
This is Foreign Secretary James Cleverly out in the US to call on the US government to go further and faster for support to Ukraine. James Cleverly doesn't believe that the US are pulling their weight and are in fact now starting to question giving US aid to Ukraine. So he's out there at the moment to offer reassurances to Washington officials and to the president to say, let's keep up the pressure out here, let's help Ukraine.
What reassurances can you give to the biggest military power in the world?
I think that's a really good question, and it's one of those things that everybody says we are here to give you an assurance that it's all going to work out well, which of course we can't do. And certainly the UK government can't do that. I think it's important for the Foreign Secretary to get the agreement of the US administration to support Ukraine going forward, because I do think there is a move in the US to stop that aid going. And I think the mood of the US public is starting to wonder why they're pouring those millions into a place that's very far away. That's a very simplistic view. But I think with us, it's a closer place. Ukraine is in Europe, so it's closer to us and people understand and support it. But I think that the US support is definitely on the wane. So anything that he can do to back that up, I think is very, very important.
Isabel and I were talking yesterday, and what we can't understand is why at the start of this whole conflict, that if you were seen to lend support tactically or with armaments or whatever to Ukraine, Russia would have viewed that as direct warfare with them. So how come now we can take 14 tanks, Norman, and there will be no consequences? We're not actually part of this war.
Well, there was a view, you're right, in saying that the Western countries, Germany in particular, were very wary about giving weapons. They were giving helmets and other things to Ukraine in order not to antagonise the Russians. But you know, the fact is that we've seen Ukraine showing great courage, amazing skill actually on the battlefield to hold back the Russians. The Russians have been incompetent as well, which has probably helped that particular scenario. And I think we're now a situation where it's potentially possible for Ukraine to win. And if the alternative...
But that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, why isn't Putin saying, oi, that we regard this as direct assault on us, you're now involved in this war?
World War III.
Well, I think he is saying that, but we're not necessarily hearing it anymore because he said it before. So I think that is still that's still the Kremlin
interesting,
line.
our Foreign Secretary did get sanctioned by Russia yesterday after coming out and rallying the troops, literally. So, you know, Russia is trying, but as you say, is that voice being lost now?
I think it's been lost. I mean, if you listen to it on other stations, Al Jazeera or whatever, you'll probably hear more about what the Russians are actually saying. But the fact of the matter is that Putin is using every single weapon he can short of nuclear weapons. He's using food now as a weapon, that's quite clear. He's using energy as a weapon. He's got no compunction about bombing civilians in tower blocks. I mean, the man is out of control.
Can we talk about Scotland's gender laws? I was talking to a Scottish nationalist who said she was absolutely outraged by the move by Westminster, and then very quickly delighted because she realised it played so perfectly into Nicola Sturgeon's hands, and indeed to their campaign in arguing for independence.
I don't think the government in Westminster has decided to use this as a kind of battle. I think it's actually facing as a real issue. And the real issue is not actually, in a way, about the Gender Recognition Act. The real issue is whether or not the Scottish Government has passed legislation which impacts on UK legislation in terms of the Equalities Act. That's actually the legal issue. And I think the government has taken legal advice quite carefully and has reached a conclusion that it does affect UK law. Now, that will be determined in the courts because Nicola Sturgeon will go to judicial review, I think, on that. So it's a legal issue. Of course, gender recognition is a hugely controversial issue, but actually it's really about that, whether or not UK law is being changed by the back door through the Scottish Parliament.
But could it lead through the back door to independence, playing into the hands of the independents?
Well, I don't think so, personally. I don't think it's that sort of issue. But hey, I'm not in Scotland.
Yeah, I think it does have some really serious repercussions because the Scottish Parliament is a devolved administration, so you do then end up in the argument as to what use is a devolved administration if it can just be overridden. So I do think this is an enormous point where we'll see other administrations, you're looking at Northern Ireland, looking at Wales, now wondering what's going to happen to them. So this is really quite serious. I don't think it's just about the gender recognition bill. That is used at the moment. You can see that Nicola Sturgeon's argument to the Scottish people is going to be, Westminster don't care about us, here is the call for independence. And I can see that coming loud and clear over the next 18 months on the run-up to an election.
Yeah, what was the phrase she said? This was some sort of... I'm trying to find the phrase now and I've lost it. So
full frontal.
Full frontal, yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly it.
Yeah. You're using that as well. Right, are we done with papers? Right, okay. I tell you what I want to talk about, and the Star is the only paper I think that hasn't gone with the police rapist on the front page, but they've gone, Claire, with the world's most feared mafia boss caught after 30 years on the run. The only distasteful thing I have about this, great that this has happened, but this is typical of this awful fascination and romance that people have and the entertainment industry have with mafia. This absolute villain, 30 years, responsible for lots of murders and all sorts of things. How did they catch him?
They caught him in a clinic in Italy where he was receiving treatment for cancer. Now, this mafia boss, he's been on the run for 30 years. He's dubbed the sort of original godfather. And he's managed to hide himself away by dressing himself as a woman on some occasions. So you've got to wonder sometimes.
Maybe he quite liked it.
Maybe he did. Yes. Maybe that was his transition moment.
Maybe that's his
excuse. This is a lesson to Nicola Sturgeon. It does happen. People
it does happen.
Advantage of these
I think that's quite.
Was she dressing as a?
No, I'm saying people take advantage of making transgender rules easier than they can get into. Anyway,
I can tell you one thing from our Department for Transport days, which was that we did some studies on the safety of cyclists, and we found that drivers gave women on bikes more space than men on bikes. And there was some guy in London who was actually dressing up with a blonde wig in order to appear a woman, in order to give themselves more space from the drivers.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
But
there's a big ongoing trial still in Sicily against the mafia, and the judges and the prosecutors involved in all this have to have round-the-clock protection because of this. So it still is a very, very real.
I was in Venice for my birthday last year, and there was a huge sign right next to the Rialto Bridge saying "Venice says no to mafia." It was quite shocking to see it in black and white. I thought, oh.
Yeah, but would somebody stand with a banner or a poster? I mean, you might hide behind a bridge and say, Venice says no, but would you say no? Scary thing.
Put your head above the parapet.
Guys, for the moment,